Hi everybody, and I hope I'm live and I think I'm okay. Give me the usual heads up that I'm on and you can hear me and everything. I haven't messed up the mic or any of that, so give me the old heads up. Hope you're all well tonight. I put as my thumbnail a picture from Rec. It's a Spanish film, Spanish kind of zombie film. I don't know if any. Oh, thanks for the 5x5 there. Yeah, Rec. It's a Spanish. I think it's set in Barcelona. A horror film. It's zombies and all of that kind of stuff. It's actually a very good, very claustrophobic film. If any of you haven't seen it, I would highly recommend it. I've been putting them as my thumbnails. I'm not a very good social media person. Like I'm good on Twitter, but YouTube, I don't know, organizing it well. I don't even know what to name these things. It's a bit of an issue. I have to figure that out. And so my thumbnail strategy is just to put up a horror film thumbnails. And some people are like, "You're being alarmist," or something. I'm like, "It's a joke," and I just can't think of anything else, lads. That's all. But yeah. So the plan for tonight is to just take a look at some random kind of news. I want to take a look at a post by a Telegram user called Orla Red, who posts a lot of Irish content about Ireland. And it's an extremely good channel. Orla Red has a BitChute account. I only have the Telegram listed below, but you can find the rest through that. He or she or they, Zier, had a YouTube channel, and it was absolutely excellent. I saw a post today by Patriot. If Patriot is watching, the the Twitter account posted something today on my Twitter about the Orla Red channel. And if anyone can pop that into the chat, I would like to have a look at it. He was just saying it's funny how Orla Red's channel got banned, even though it didn't have any content. It wasn't doing what I'm doing now, which is speaking to you and giving an opinion, which I think is fine, but at least someone could argue, well, that's over the line. Orla Red's channel was an archival channel. It took clips from the news media or viral clips that were going around online or whatever. It had no content of its own. It would just clip bits from the radio. So I don't know, someone says we should have open borders, blah, blah, blah. Someone says this, someone says that on Ryan Tuberty or whatever. He would take that clip and just post it on YouTube diligently. And you would get several every day. And somehow they had the ability to archive all that footage. But again, that's all it was, and they banned that. So that should tell you a lot. Yeah, Walshy says it was just clips from radio shows, basically. And that should tell you all you need to know about the whole thing of banning, it online. It's not about whether you said some kind of slur or incorrect thing or whatever. It's about a political point of view, very much so, and more so. Yeah, it's a political point of view you cannot have, and some things which you cannot criticize, no matter how moderate, or even in Orla Red's case, it's not even a matter of radicalism versus moderation. It's just footage that already exists. That's all it was. So I'll get on to that, and then I want to. Maybe you've heard enough from me on this, but I felt like doing it anyway. I keep mentioning Italy. I was talking about Computing Forever's video and some other people who were skeptics. And I was just giving as a small kind of counter example, maybe the Italy situation. And someone asked me earlier to give them more information on that. And I realized maybe I glossed over it last night. I had just kind of mentioned it and not focused on it. And I suppose it's worth doing. So I just have a lot of different stats and sources and stuff like that on to just bolster, and I think everybody gets it by now, but just to bolster the point of Italy's death rate. That's not an argument. That's not an overwhelming argument against every skeptic, or like someone like Peter Hitchens. He says he has certain arguments which it's not like the Italy stats would defeat all of his arguments, because it's multifaceted. It's about facts, it's about numbers, it's about flu, it's about political reaction, overreaction, strategy, and all of that kind of stuff. But just insofar as I think the Italy thing is important, I want to back it up a little bit more. Serena's here. How's it going? What is the crack? So yeah, that's basically what I want to go through. And yeah, the Italy thing, and again, I don't mean to just, the reason I harp on about, let's say, Computing Forever's argument is not some kind of like, because I love when people try to pick off other people's kind of content, or I hate it really, in a kind of poking holes just to be an arsehole instead of coming up with your own ideas. I'm not doing it in that way. It's out of respect because, I've had people send me tons of stuff and some really dodgy sources and all of that. And Dave's is a coherent, logical argument. It's out of respect for the quality of that, is why I'm choosing that. I mean, I could say Peter Hitchens as well. John Waters, of course, has musings on it that are very interesting. It would be out of respect that I'd address those kind of arguments. And something I've noticed as well, I don't like using the term conspiracy theorist, tinfoil hat or whatever, but I have noticed some of the people with, let's say, more radical conspiratorial views, I've noticed some of them moderating today, just in online content. I've noticed it has kind of, in a large way, reeled itself back into about that Peter Hitchens level, which I find is very interesting. It's gone from some of the more outlandish things it was, which they were very liberally putting out there. It's this, it's that, it's this, it's that. It's kind of gone back to more like, well, with a lockdown, people, it could increase suicide rates and despair, and those are fine arguments. But I find it interesting how it has kind of retreated back to that as we've gone. And whatever, I'm not gloating about that. I'm just saying it's an interesting thing to see that happen, because you would think, well, if you have out there beliefs, you would have them all the time, but actually they can be tempered maybe a little bit as they go. But the point I was just mentioning, I was just caveating that it's a respectful thing towards the Computing Forever's video. But one of the arguments I noticed was about testing actually, I might start on the Italy thing if you don't mind me doing this, lads. He mentioned a lot about the testing in Italy and referenced many esteemed doctors who were pointing at various flaws in Italy's testing. Like, maybe Italy, unlike some other countries, will test people who died with coronavirus as opposed to dying from coronavirus, right? That's a great point, because it's like, yeah, that would influence things and of course make it very difficult to get any kind of accurate reading and cast doubt maybe on the kind of scale of the problem in Italy that has been alleged. But again, I go back to overall death rate, and it's like the fact that they've got a kind of shoddy version of calculating numbers there. And maybe you could talk about testing and false positives and negative. You could go on all day with that stuff. But my point is, like, when we know about, I'm just going to find where I'm supposed to be here and share the screen with you. So I am about here. I haven't got these lined up in any hugely ordered way, but they are there. So I just don't see the point in kind of saying, hey, there could be a lot of vagaries in the testing, and that will always be the case in every country in every way. So in a way, that heuristic is a kind of it's not a win, let's say, for either side of an argument, because it's like, it leaves us not knowing anything. Surely the effort should be to maybe point towards a heuristic that is maybe not bulletproof, but is more likely to tell you something clearly. And I would say that is overall death rate. And anyway, so there's many things here. So as I read them, I'm kind of re-ingesting them again and trying to get track. Which one is this again? I haven't gone through them in fine-tooth comb. And by the way, you can re-verify all these sources. If one of these is a hoax website that I haven't picked up on or something like that, fair enough. This kind of thing, go for it. But in the totality of it, it is what it is. I haven't researched the background of every journalist who ever wrote this, and I didn't go into the office where they collected the statistics and, double check them for myself or whatever. Whatever, the sources are up for whatever all the time, of course. But this one says, the real death toll for COVID-19 is at least 4 times the official numbers. So the argument on maybe the counter-alarmist, the skeptic side would be the death toll is being overrated and the case numbers are being underrated, which overrates the death toll and all of these testing anomalies and stuff. But this one makes it actually the inverse argument, and it in a certain way. Nembro, which is a municipality, this is just one municipality again. It's not, for example, none of this counters every skeptical argument out there. I'm just making a point here in general. Someone could say, well, that's one municipality. I know it is, but Nembro, one of the municipalities most affected by COVID-19, should have had, under normal conditions, about 35 deaths. 158 people were registered, and so normal conditions is taking the past couple of years and kind of averaging it out. Should have had about 35 deaths. 158 people were registered dead this year by municipal offices, but the number of deaths officially attributed to COVID-19 is 31. So basically the point is that there's this big gap, right? And unless someone wants to come in and say, well, clearly we all know that was the pollution, or something like that, right? Insert some kind of other explainer. If we just kind of go with a bit of little bit of what's it called, Occam's razor, we see here these lines. So we have, let me work these out along with you here now. So so the big line is the amount of people who died. And I'm by the way, a little thing for you here. I'm actually half colorblind. So the line at the bottom is average deaths from 2015 to 2019, I think. Then this larger line here, the top one, is deaths in 2020. And then the other one is the middle one here is attributed to COVID. And everything in the middle is a gap. Sorry, I'm kind of all over the place with that. It's just really small font here. But that's kind of the point. It's in text here. So there's 123 more people than average died. Now, again, you explain that to me. I don't know. COVID, right? Anyway, that source is small and I couldn't really see it. A lot of this is in Italian as well. And I've had Italian friends translate it for me and kind of just tell me what it's saying. And I can't get a Google Translate here. So I'm coming back to this stuff being like, what's it saying again? I get the gist. This is deaths in March 2019 in this place. 125 last year, 602 this year, which is a factor of whatever increase, right? Some statistics I had, and these are actually a week or two old. These are a little bit old. So we have 330 deaths in a week, a particular week recently, a few weeks ago actually, 14 times more than the same week last year. We have, again, this is Italian, whatever. I've been given it by trusted Italian friends. Here we have deaths as we go, and just this massive spike from previous to 2014. So over years. So this whole thing of I heard there was a bad flu in 2016. This is a lot higher in a shorter period of time as a spike. Here we have excess deaths in Lombardy, and that is that one. And this is a very interesting graph as well. So it requires a bit of picking through. Hope I'm not killing you here with these graphs. So I hope you can see it well enough. I wish I could make it bigger, but there, it's about as grand as visible as it'll get. But so you have what the black line here is expected deaths based on past years, right? Someone could dig in, argue with the methodology. I'm just going to assume that it's reasonable and rational. Expected deaths based on past years. The sum of expected deaths plus confirmed COVID is this. And then you have this extra large bit here, which is just all deaths. So there's this gap. Big coincidence? I don't know. And that is for Spain. So in terms of Spain having the median age thing doesn't explain much to me. It explains a bit. But again, like I said yesterday, Graf Torino, someone says, like I said yesterday, Germany has a higher median age profile than Italy. So, the same people who will say, well, Germany's got a low rate of deaths from the virus, will also explain away the Italy one with age profile. So it's kind of like a bit of a which one is it? And of course, the same in Italy. You can just see the scale of it there. Again, that solid line there at the bottom is what you would expect kind of average deaths to be in general. God, I love tea. So that is that. Here's another one. I found this one interesting. So this is deaths basically, and this is done by day within March. So this is kind of within March from the 3rd to the 21st. And the different colors down here are for the different years. So you have 2015, 2016, 2017, 2018, 2019, and 2020. 2020 is this one here. I wish I weren't so damn colorblind. and I'm not completely colorblind. I'm just I'm fuzzy around the edges, the red-green thing and stuff like that. So I'm always reluctant to. It's as if you don't know how to tell the time and you're trying to hide it or something. I'm like, the one on the right. I'm pretty sure I know what it is, but yeah. So that one is 2020 anyway. So as we see, as the month progresses on, the gap is just speaks for itself completely. There's no kind of doubt about that. And some of these previous years had, worse flus than other years and stuff like that. It is completely different. And again, if you look to this blue one here, or whatever it is, 2019, Italy and the North and all of that had a high age profile that year as well. I don't think they all just suddenly became extremely elderly in the last year. And potential high levels of pollution in the north of Italy, I don't think it all happened in the last year or the year before that. So again, we have this gap, and again, my point here is that this doesn't explain the entire story of the world. I'm just saying, if you're going to talk about issues maybe with testing and selection and sample bias and classifications and all of that stuff, that is all well and good. But you have to look at this and kind of go, yeah, no, that is true. But at the same time, like all these graphs here, like you have take your pick of which time frame you use. It's 5 times as many people died. This is overall deaths, not a specific illness. 5 times. I've seen 15 times for various little smaller villages and districts or whatever. 5, 10, 15, whatever. That's not normal. That's extremely alarming. That's an emergency, obviously. And it just, again, it brings me back to that whole thing of sample bias and questions of that. It's like, well, how relevant is that at the end of the day, when this is the overall situation in Italy? Not saying it's irrelevant. You get my point. It's just how can you think of one without the other? Excess deaths in selected towns in northern Italy. So I touched on this. Nembro 1,000%, so 10 times higher. Alzano, Lombardo, 9 times higher. Albino 7. Codono 480%. Excuse me. We have this is from Lecco di Bergamo. So this is just all of the different little municipalities in Bergamo, and this is measured for the entirety of March. And I broke these down. I was calculating these, and now I didn't post about it because I was afraid with all the numbers here, even with Excel or whatever. I was thinking, I don't know, I might have misplaced a number here or there. I don't want to trust myself, and I couldn't be bothered doing it a second time. But for what it's worth, it was about 600% for all of Bergamo. Out of these numbers, this is I think this is measuring it from March 1st to March 21st. So it's a smaller proportion because there's that crucial 9 or 10 days of, virus running rampant. That would have increased the numbers again. But so shave a week off and you naturally get lower numbers. You have 285%, 263, 247%. Here we have another way of looking at it. This is the color difference here with the blue and the red is just male, female. Just think of it as deaths. And it's this is in Bergamo. Yeah, this is in Bergamo too. So here we see this increase. So it changed in terms of week to week, month to month, year to year. It's not some little, I'm not the one with the sample bias here, where it's like, oh, well, maybe there was just something explained it from one month to another. And that happens every year. It's like, well, we have years as well, and we have months, and we have weeks, and we have various little baselines here. We have, this is just another one. I think this is quite old, actually, 22nd of March. Again, is there any point in digging into what the meaning of these ones are? This is Lombardy, excess deaths, and what are we? This is the first one that came out before people got the chance to put stats together and stuff. This was a very clever little kind of informal way to look at it, which was obituaries being 10 times more or whatever it was, which, I'll never get over the idea that those were faked. Someone asking me that. And that's about that. So, I mean, what is my point on the Italy thing? I think it speaks for itself. It's just that, a lot of these arguments looking at uncertain kind of liminal spaces in data and what we can know are worth making as arguments. But to me, I'm like, well, why would you go to the vaguest places to assert uncertainty, if that makes sense, when you could try to find the most certain, or the most, the most kind of solid heuristics to look at. That's kind of the way I see it. Now, the counter argument is you go to Germany, and that if you take the same heuristic, it's smaller. But again, I'd argue they're later on in the curve. It got its teeth into Italy first. Everybody knows that. So it makes sense to kind of look at that and go, okay, while it might not be true for everybody, every country, let's not be alarmist. It's not some irrelevant afterthought or kind of like whatever either. It's a very legitimate place to base a lot of your thinking off of. And so with Spain and Netherlands and now the UK as well, and a lot of other countries, which are all moving kind of in that direction, not as hard, not as solidly. But again, it comes back to the lockdown. I've heard it said that, well, the lockdown makes my argument, let's say, unfalsifiable. I mean, it makes it unfalsifiable. So it's like, oh, we can't prove a difference. But I'm like, well, we come back to Italy. Italy locked down a little bit on the later side. It obviously was flying around Italy for a bit longer. And I can't, that's my suspicion. I'm not fully certain of that, but I think it's kind of just understood. But yeah, so it's like we don't have a baseline. Well, it's like we kind of do. We kind of have Wuhan and we kind of have Italy, which are notorious places where it kind of got it. It wasn't locked down. It didn't have measures put on it for a while. And it kind of, the horse kind of bolted. If you're looking for an example of a place where the horse just kind of bolted. And I have a source here as well. Sweden is taking a laissez-faire approach. But that doesn't mean that Sweden is not taking any measures. They're just letting it be more voluntary. But I think if you were to go to Sweden, I'd say you would find rather quiet streets as well, which is much different to a place that's just operating as normal with the virus kind of working around the community, which would be, I would say, probably Milan, Wuhan, places like that. So the idea that we can't falsify it or whatever, well, it's like on one hand we have Italy, Wuhan, places like that. And on the other hand, we have South Korea, which did lockdowns and testing and all of that, and theirs went lower. So it's not like we don't have these different things to look at. And again, there could be ifs and buts to throw in there that I might be interested to see, where it's like, oh, actually testing this and that and the other. But to kind of make these, to look at these, like I say, these things where it's like that doesn't quite add up or whatever, while ignoring the fundamental kind of positive argument on it, which is almost ignored because it's like, well, that's mainstream, so it doesn't count within this kind of how we look at the information. It's like, well, of course it does. I mean, it does. I suppose to kind of sum it up, I question the idea of looking squarely at the inconsistencies while ignoring all of the consistencies. It's like it's if you're trying to make a point, fair enough, but that's just my ramble there on that. So I don't know what you all make of that. I would really like to just sit down and read the chat for a few minutes and like get typing and join you. I'm almost kind of jealous. And I do have this idea in the back of my mind as a stream idea. It would be really bad because you would all leave. But of putting on a song, muting my mic, taking my camera down for a second, playing a song, and then just checking back on the chat, which I don't think would work because you didn't come here to listen to a song necessarily. Just because I'd like it doesn't mean it's a good idea. But although I will give you a song recommendation at the end of this. So yeah, anyway, just kind of bear with me while I have a look at the chat. Portugal is regularizing illegals, migrants, but the Irish government does the same. Pretty much, I've seen some stuff going around today that the Dole office and all of that won't be sharing data with the GNIB and the INIS and immigration authorities. So basically, if you're an illegal immigrant here or whatever, and you want to go in and collect dole or payment or whatever, you can do that. And I'm back to the kind of asylum argument I made a few weeks ago, and you can call me soft or whatever on this. Sorry. There we go. But my point on this kind of remains the same, and it will sound very soft or whatever, but it's like, so, okay, they can do that now, but I would just say during a crisis, whatever you want to call it, the idea that you would take all of these people, and some people in the chat are not going to like me saying this, you would take all these people and do this mass deportation thing, or whatever it is, right? To say, okay, now we've caught you. It's like, well, the amount of human contact that would kind of necessitate, and resources, and flying people home at the moment, it just sounds like a headache to me. And I'm not just being honest about how I feel about this. But that doesn't mean I'm like, oh, that's a great thing. It's a terrible thing that's happening. We shouldn't, same thing I said about the asylum situation. We shouldn't be in this position where that's our problem. We should enforce our rules and our laws and not have the piss taken out of us that way. In general, it shouldn't in a way have to come to this to say, let's do it. Now, it's grand if you want to kind of promote your message and kind of boost the idea of, show how bad the Department of Justice are in our government, and the fact that we actually have so many illegal immigrants and all of that. Make that point, but just kind of between you and me, shall we say. I feel like between you and me on a video on the internet. But, it's like, well, in reality, as it is, it's like, it's just probably the simplest measure to just give them their, government books and just whatever. In the grand scheme of things, it's probably a lot cheaper than getting them home in the middle of all of this right now, when it would be a logistical nightmare with all of the social distancing and all that, to put Irish civil service in the way of that, which they wouldn't have to be, I suppose. But again, it's the same point. That doesn't mean I'm justifying it. I'm just saying, in general, we should not have this problem. And going forward, we should make it so that we don't have problems like this. It would be very easy with technology. Like in America, they talk about e-verify and all that. It would be very easy. There'd be so many ways if the government wanted to. They just don't. It is government policy to have a massive amount of informal labor, cheap labor, flexible kind of labor pool for the economy. So as it ups and downs, they can be shed and they can be brought back in, and disposable and attainable, and of course to kind of what's the word I would use? People say it lowers wages. It doesn't lower wages. It has a stagnating effect on wages. So that's my take on that. But let's have a look at. I saw I'm on world map here, this kind of thing or whatever, right? For whatever it's worth. Always just find the New York thing is going to be interesting. So yeah, look at how many cases. New York has 92,000 cases, which is like probably as many as like Italy or some of these bigger European countries. But New York has 20 million people as opposed to 60 in Italy and 40 in Spain. They have a lot of cases. So we'll see how their hospitals cope. I saw James O'Keefe was inside in hospitals, like doing like skepticism kind of live cam with nurses and stuff, which I'm actually not against. This whole thing of like D-wall and people in hospitals and all of that. Now, they might look at an empty ER or emergency room or A&E. I'm like a yank here saying ER. I see there's an active 5G conversation going on in here. I'm getting more interested in that. I just want I need to find somebody, no disrespect to anybody who's into 5G. There's a lot of people out there who are, there might be some very good people who are into 5G and want to tell you about it. And then some people, maybe you're not quite sure about the sources they're giving you and stuff like that. And in the same way as I'm saying, like the skeptical libertarian argument against this pandemic measures, I'm at the point now where I can't be flooded by just anybody. And it sounds ignorant or arrogant, but I'll get back to the hospitals. Adrian Walsh is saying, I'll get back to that. But it sounds arrogant for me to say. It's just, when you do videos and stuff like that, and I do encourage it, but sometimes then I'm kind of overwhelmed with like, someone will send you an email with like 20 links and someone else will do the same and whatever. And you're kind of going, I definitely don't have time. And then you look through a lot of them and a lot of them are kind of a bit suspicious looking, or so you go, I'm sure there's some very good stuff, and it's hard to separate one from the other. So sometimes you do have to kind of retreat to like, okay, I'm going to go via Dave Cullen, I'm going to go via Peter Hitchens and whoever, and they're kind of very good curators of good stuff who I trust and all of that. So I'll get it in condensed and quality assured, I don't mean that in a bad way to anyone in particular. I'm sure you see my point of view. But what was I saying? Yeah, I want that for 5G actually. Someone I initially trust from previous times, or I'm familiar with already, who I can go, yeah, well, they've never bullshitted me before, and they're always careful to curate and be truthful and factual and all of that, and have someone like that talking about it. If I could find someone like that, that would be nice. But in terms of hospitals, so you have D-Wall and all of these people, and James O'Keefe a bit, and people all over the place, I suppose, taking videos of empty A&Es. And while I kind of go, well, I mean, I suppose I would kind of expect that, to a large extent, them to be empty. Like, I was kind of joking when I first saw someone do a video like that. I was like, here's what we should expect during a pandemic lockdown. Nurses and doctors having coffee in large groups in the lobby, people with balloons and punnets of grapes hanging around, thronging the corridors, patients going for a walk, chatting, hustle and bustle. And I was going, well, I'm being sarcastic there, because it's like, no, that's exactly what you don't expect. You expect the opposite of that. You expect it to be rather deserted in a lot of parts of the hospital. That doesn't mean they're wrong. That doesn't mean they're not onto something. Who knows, right? But what I do feel like, regardless, is people being like, you should not do that, and this is, risky or causing trouble, getting in people's way and all that. I'm like, well, no. I mean, it's only so many people. D-Wall takes a couple of videos, so and so does it, someone else does it. It's not like they're inundated with D-Walls doing it. It's going to be a very rare occurrence. So it's like, do you know what? Yeah, maybe it is good. Maybe it is good to, even if I completely disagree or I don't believe them, I'm incredulous to it, I still go, yeah, but I mean, even if they were totally off the wall and completely wrong in their perceptions and their analysis of what they're seeing and all of that, even if they fully were, I'd still be like, yeah, but it's probably good to see it, like, right? Saves us all having to go in there out of our own curiosity, Good. So long as it's ethical and you're not getting patients on their deathbed or sick or getting their identity or whatever. And by the way, just as a counterexample, I did see some of D-Wall and some other people doing videos, for example, outside Croke Park, saying it's closed, there's nobody there. And apparently it's because they ran out of kits and all of that. Whether you believe it or not, it's your business. But that was the rationale for that day, it being quiet. But I thought, well, it is easy for people like that to take videos of it like quiet when it's like that. Because I was there, insofar as you trust me, I'm obviously not lying to you here. I went down there twice to Croke Park to scope it out when it opened. And when I went down there, there were cars going in one after another. And I'll never forget, there was this one woman, a guy driving the car in the front, the husband, I would say. And in the back was, I assume, the wife. So sitting in the back, keeping a distance from him, she had like a mask on or some kind of thing over her face. And she had big, like, Jackie Onassis sunglasses on. And she was just slumped down in her chair. She looked really sick. She looked sticky. And just kind of, what's the word? What's the word for clammy? She looked really sick. And I saw her and I saw loads of others, one after another, going in and in and in. And the same I saw down at the tent one, down on the Quays in Dublin, what's it called? Rogerson Quay or whatever, when that tent facility was opened up for testing. I saw multiple people with their spouses, and I actually stood like near enough, not too near, but I was just kind of there scoping it out. And I saw people come along, husband and wife, and he waits and she goes in and she has a piece of paper, like a prescription type of thing from her doctor. And someone says actors, look, whatever, it's a certain, that's my jumping off point, I'm afraid. But yeah, they were going in and getting their tests, and some of them looked a bit sick, some of them didn't look so bad, that kind of thing, whatever, just kind of what you would expect. But again, I'm not going to take videos of that because obviously they have the right to their privacy of their medical situation, and you're openly giving away their medical situation. They're doing that, so I can't take videos of that. So yeah, cozy thing. Yeah, Critique is asking me. I've already said the word many times. I'm trying to avoid the algorithm, but I've already messed up, I'd say. But yeah, so it's just, there is a kind of bias in how things can be framed as well sometimes, because it's like, hey, I could have come back with videos. I didn't even take those videos. Maybe I should have. But Critique says it's being exaggerated in his opinion. I mean, the bar for whether it's being exaggerated, I mean, you have full lockdown, as Justin Barrett described it, martial law. Anything short of apocalypse happening means it's an overreaction, when the reaction is as much of a reaction as you could do, basically. So yeah, I mean, the argument that it's an overreaction, I can completely go with. Maybe the reaction should be different. And so, for example, Computing Forever's video, that was a big point of his, was this kind of common sense point of view that maybe isolate more vulnerable people and it doesn't need to come to this or whatever. Yeah. No, you could counter argue that, I don't know, but it's a perfectly reasonable argument, and I would probably lean towards it in general. But at the same time, critiques. He just joined and he's just seen the title. Don't say the word. Yeah, I don't want to say the word. Oh yeah, last True Gale reminded me, being cool. So we have the Mater Hospital on Twitter here. They tell us that we were at full capacity nearly in the ICUs. That it was a woman wrote this, I can tell already. We are at full capacity nearly in the ICU, and our next plan is to go to our phase 2 surge capacity, and that is moving to the HDU ward, whatever that is. The ward was never originally designed to have ventilated patients, but it is part of a surge. Oh, I'm so wrong, Dr. Coleman. Okay, it was a man. Maybe he's like, female spirit on the inside. It was something about we're at full capacity nearly. I felt like you'd usually say we were nearly at full capacity. Anyway, I was pretty wrong there, wasn't I? But the point being, we're going to start approaching this ICU capacity, and this is just that hospital. Maybe it's got a low capacity, and it's other hospitals are prioritized for kind of ICUs and stuff. But we're already getting there, and we are in lockdown. Our numbers aren't that high. We have been in this lockdown thing, and that's my, counter argument to the whole idea that like the lockdown is over the top, it's totalitarian, maybe the virus isn't that big a deal, samples, sample bias and all of that stuff. I go, hey, say we just said, let's not react. And by the way, that's not Peter Hitchens' point of view, Dave Cullen's point of view. I'm not putting that on them. But just they don't make that argument. But just as a kind of a, like, even if we did the half measure, the reasonable half measure, you would expect, that it would increase our numbers a bit. But, because while it is still a measure, it would keep the numbers down. It wouldn't keep them down to the extent that this full lockdown would, let's say, right? How quickly would we be hurtling towards this full ICU capacity thing? I would say quite fast, but and that's where that's where people start dying, basically. And you come back to, I don't have it on me now, but there have been stats going around today. Maybe Last True Gale can insert them in the chat if he feels like it. But about how many are in ICU, how many recovered, how many died, and there's a big gap of people who died who like neither died in ICU or were in ICU. Anyway, the numbers are weird. But the general point I'm making about ICUs is that's when people start dying, and that's if you lower the measures and let. You would think let the virus run a bit more free. You would expect we would get closer to triage, field hospitals, and ICUs running out, and ventilators running out, and people starting to die. And again, yes, they're old. Yes, they might have pre-existing conditions, but it is still people dying left, right, and center. And the alternative of shutting down the economy for a few weeks, months, whatever, we'll have to see what that economic toll is. The idea that, the counter argument is that people will all start killing themselves and starving to death and this and that and everything else, right? I mean, we will also have to see an example of that, in the same way as people go, oh, there's uncertainty in New York, there's uncertainty in this, which is why we shouldn't react. I would also say, well, on the flip side, we haven't seen all these people like jumping off bridges quite yet. We haven't seen, maybe the economy will find some way to manage. Maybe there'll be a new gear. And then I get into my kind of LARPing, my political viewpoint, which is like, maybe it's a good thing. Maybe this kind of attack, and I talked about this yesterday, so I won't repeat it, but maybe this kind of restructuring of global supply chains, of global neoliberalism, a reprioritization of the economy, you know, maybe a reorienting more from financialization over to manufacturing, the kind of like, we have to just keep each other going here. Could be a kind of a, how would you say, a cleanse or whatever, you know, which is dangerous to go off too much in that. I know you have to be pragmatic and realistic and not get into some kind of like radical political fantasy either, but there's some element of that could be true. There could be a silver lining, a plus side to this, as well as just it being, you know, everybody's going to kill themselves and everybody will starve. It's like, well, we'll have to see how that plays out. Same way we'll have to see how some of these numbers and how some of this virus plays out and everything else, right? So that's that. And now I just want to get onto Orla Red's thing, and I think then we'll more or less be done. I'll just get one or two things out of the way because that's an important thing, Orla Red's post. Okay, here's one thing. I got sent this, some elderly man, as I describe here, an elderly man outside Lidl on Moore Street, who I'm told seemed a bit tapped, evangelizing his message about the Chinese as follows. So apparently he's walking around kind of ranting and talking about it, and he had the sign in his hands and he left it there and then was walking around, just generally on a crusade or a kind of an evangelistic kind of mission. So what it says is, I have to be very careful here, lads, because if I start reading this out, algorithm and, you know, the NGOs could clip this and post it on my, you know, you take one of the NGO people who has a file on you, and if you think I'm being paranoid, they have a file on me. Doesn't mean I'm a big deal. The fact that I'm not a big deal shows you how crazy the NGOs are, but they do have their little files. He once said this on Twitter 4 years ago, and he said that just for the newspaper articles and all of that, right? So they can pastiche it all together. And if I start reading this out, they're going to edit and clip that and have this on like wherever. It says the Chinese and other sick. You just have to read that yourself, right? But it is a full on, and I'm not like getting. So Laura says the old dude is right. I know we could go that direction, and I appreciate that point of view, but like a little bit. But this is full on. When people say, "Oh, that's a very radical, you know, violent, quasi-genocidal point of view," you know, they'll often say that you're like literally Hitler and stuff, and you're like, "Well, no, that's nonsense." But you read this sign and you go, "Well, it is like right. It's it just is." I'm reading it now. Yeah, it is, and I just think, you know, for one, he's a Christian man, and I'm no theologist on Christianity, right? But I don't think wiping out the vermin and all of that of the earth comes up. Correct me if I'm wrong. And also, I come back to this whole thing of blaming the Chinese as a distraction. I'm really concerned that some of these narratives are being fed. I had a conversation with someone about this today. And this isn't me being pro-China or don't, you know, Chinese eat all these creatures and it's disgusting or whatever, right? Fine. And, you know, would I end Chinese immigration and, more importantly, the buying of real estate and capital in Ireland? I would absolutely ban that. But am I like freaking out on this kind of like thing about the Chinese, you know, just an empty kind of sentiment? No, it's not my problem. It's not my immediate problem. And my worry is that, like I say, I was talking to someone today about it, and it's like, if I were the same way all of these globalists at the moment are looking at the virus, and their political message at the moment is, they're not talking about how will we take advantage of this. Not really. One of their main, because they're not going to take advantage of it, I think. And one of their main concerns they often say is that the radical right or whatever nationalists will take advantage of it, and that's their big concern. And again, this is actually a conspiracy theory. I'm being open with you about it. A theory, only a theory or whatever, right? But here's what I would do if I was one of them, and they are smart. They're not thick, right? They're as smart as we are, or more, whatever. They will, I'm imagining I'm one of them, and I think, how can we get a message out there through our kind of right-wing buddies? You know, the way at the top, it's just one big sandwich, right? There's this kind of thing of like, let's pump a message out there, because the last thing we want them talking about is real nationalism, right? Let's reclaim our countries. Let's have more sustainable living for ourselves, and we be ourselves, define ourselves, self-reliance, all of these things, return to tradition or whatever, all of that, right? And the last thing we want is them going down that road thoughtfully. So what can we do?
tell them they're really racist and bad. Tell them they're really mean and terrible and they should shut up or ban them, or, you know, it's like, I could imagine a clever guy at the back of the room being like, I have an idea. Let's get them to think, to just kind of, let's throw them some red meat that, oh, the Chinese are bad. And that's the big talking point. And that's how you express your general reaction to it. Because people are, on a mass scale, can be simplistic enough, not to sound too arrogant. So, oh, it's China and all this stuff, instead of kind of focusing on the prize, eye on the prize, I think. Because it's like, we're here in Ireland, and we could go, oh, China are so bad, or something like that. China are terrible, the CCP, and oh, some of their practices are bad. Yeah, but, you know, what influence is that going to do? You know, I just think, keep the eye on the prize closer to home. And again, my theory of this clever guy in the room kind of filtering this message down in order to subvert kind of the thing. I know it does sound like a conspiracy theory, but it doesn't even need to be true necessarily. It could be true. But my point is that even if that's not true, that's what I would do. I'm just demonstrating my point and how I think this is the wrong approach. That's just my opinion. And I don't know what the story is with this guy holding the sign. But, you know, it's like, hey, you know, the CCP aren't necessarily your problem, like, not the immediate one. But that's just a little point of view there. You can kind of take that or leave that. I just found it interesting. The next thing is we have medical supplies seized from alleged price gouger to be distributed to hospitals. So this was, I think, in New York. He had 200,000 N95 masks hoarded, and loads of other stuff, like 1 million different pieces of equipment, 600,000 medical gloves, right? This is hoarding taken to. I thought the car boot full of toilet roll was something, but this guy's taken it to a whole new level. Baruch Feldheim, so a New Yorker, was, yeah, so got all that stuff and was selling it off at 700% above market value. So that is serious, like entrepreneurship, or kind of good with money, or like, or, you know, obviously has a good eye for it, but I just think that's very unethical. So that's my point on that. And actually, it's not my point on that, because what I found most interesting about that is I was on Twitter just looking at somewhere where this was posted, kind of gone viral, and there was this kind of little sub thread going on between this kind of American what would you call it? You know, certain type of Republican or conservative, whatever it was, saying, that's his private property. The government have no right to infringe on his private property. And I just thought, sometimes things are beyond argument. You know, it's like, to be so far in that mindset that you're justifying this guy and not just taking the common sense approach. You know, it's like when we all first discovered conservatism and right wing and stuff like that. Sometimes you take the entry level arguments coming in, the stuff Ben Shapiro will tell you, and you just run with it. And a time goes by, and even though part of your mind is like, that doesn't really make common sense, that just sounds wrong to me, and eventually you get rid of it. I did anyway. And it's like a thing like that, like making the argument that that's his private property, and you know, the government have no right to infringe on his right to buy and sell and trade and hoard. And it's like, man, nah. If it doesn't make sense, it doesn't make sense. Basically, I don't see any, like, you know, philosophical principle or political ideal or whatever, or some kind of like Bill of Rights type thing that can you know, supersede the fact that is just wrong and needs to be addressed, and he needs to be taken down and tossed in a jail cell for this, I would say. So now, with those little kind of sub pieces of news, nation state says Shapiro is a vile creature. So so now that I'm off those little tidbits of news, tidbits, I want to focus on Orla Red's post today. I have to, yeah. When you talk, you get like trapped wind, and you need to like belch. It's rank, but it is a thing of talking for like an hour. You fast. I don't know why it happens. It doesn't happen when you speak to someone, but it happens when you're doing it yourself. So it's just a little FYI. Anyway, Orla Red, like I spoke about him earlier, or him, they, their, zir. If you could all just go to the description of the video here, And there's, if you're on your phone, maybe not, because I want you to keep watching, but if you're on a desktop, or just make a note of it, go to his Telegram and join or subscribe or whatever it is. And if you're not on Telegram, get on it. You have to be on it, because we can be banned all the time. Some of my favorite content people or figures from 2-3 years ago, all gone. And you go onto Telegram and you open it up, and it's far more feisty and less self-censored and everything. It's brilliant. Absolutely be on Telegram. And it's very easy to use, very handy, very fun. Very fun. I don't know. You know what I'm saying. Get on Telegram and follow Orla Red's thing. One of the first things I do every day, I don't know, I check your email, check your whatever, and I check Orla Red's Telegram for some interesting bits. So with that said, I haven't, So anyway, Richard Boyd Barrett has warned that hundreds of thousands, or hundreds of students, it's actually thousands, Orla Red corrects the text here, editorializes. I would say it's probably tens of thousands personally, but it's a lot of people in language schools around the country are living in cramped conditions with no supports during the pandemic outbreak. According to the survey, only 12.5% have been granted access to the COVID-19 pandemic payment, with many rejected because they have not yet worked in Ireland, do not have a PPS or GNIB number, or they have not yet been registered with revenue by their employer. So they're kind of on the black here. And this is the whole English visa farm, this English school visa farm type thing, getting visas, getting entry to the country, working on the black, la-di-da-di-da, these English schools. I've seen some of these English schools, right? And it's just people hanging around for a few hours. It's basically all a scam. These English schools, it's all about getting in, getting a visa, working, whatever. And if you're okay with them doing that, that's fine. But this is just a scam racket. And what is interesting here is Richard Boyd Barrett carries water for these people here. I'm sure they're nice people, some of the people individually, but it's not fair. I wouldn't expect the right to do that in Brazil, right? It's simple enough. And other people who are working have to pay their taxes, and that's it. Like, you know, so why should we have to pay taxes when they don't? It's a fairness rule, but it goes above and beyond that. This kind of dimes and cents kind of stuff, and the revenue. It's also just about having the piss taken out of you as a country, and not only that, but having a media space that doesn't tell you about this and makes it impossible to know, makes it impossible to find out. And not only that, but makes it so that you can't find out. Because if you go to find out you're a bad person, you get fired from your job, blah, 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 you're racist, whatever, right? So anyway, Orla Red is just editorializing here, and it's so well put, so finely put, I have to say. If they are learning English, have no PPS number and aren't registered with the revenue, don't they have enough funds to survive whether or not classes are on? So if they are, as they claim they are, I'm here just learning English, I don't work, right? That's part of the deal. I don't work, I'm just here to learn English. Well, the equation there is that through whatever means, they had enough money to just come over here and just learn English and just keep doing that. So under those pretenses, you would say, well, you know, a pandemic happening and shutdown, you should be the last person affected because you were just coasting on whatever you were coasting on anyway, just to learn English. And now the only difference is every day you don't learn English, you just stay at home. So you should be fine. What's the issue here? And we come back to Richard Boyd Barrett sticking up for them. He shouldn't be doing this. Again, this is his business. Like, he's concerning himself with this. I'm not saying he should come out and say they should all be ejected, you know, from the country immediately, but just at the very least say nothing. The fact that he's making this an issue shows you where he's at, where his sympathies lie. And, you know, the country is going through a hard time right now. We're going to have hundreds of thousands unemployed. It is going to be lean and it's going to be difficult. This isn't our problem. This is Brazil's problem. And you can be sure Irish people, you know, living under the floorboards, so to speak, in Australia. I know many people. They've been busted, overstayed their visa, whatever it is. They get busted back home. They're inside in a cafe the next day or wherever it is. They're trying to get some work because they're like, oh, you know, I just got fucked out, basically. And there's no conversation of, well, that was very mean of them. Are they like Hitler or something, you know? No conversation. It doesn't even come to mind. It's like, I got busted because I was doing that, and I'm there. I got caught. I just got caught, so I got bounced. Simple as. But Richard Boyd Barrett is working for these guys. It's disgusting. So I'm quoting Orla Red here again. If they are actually just pretending to learn English in order to work here, then why aren't they registered with the revenue? Bottom line is there are thousands of migrants who use the English school visa farm racket to work here. They're off the books. The government has encouraged the practice, and that's key. The government is always I've seen them making specific allowances for Brazilian visas and all of this kind of stuff, right? They want their Deliveroo drivers and all of that stuff, right? Which is, people say, well, I want my Deliveroo, but it's like, hey, there was a time when you give these jobs to 16-year-olds or, people down on their luck. You would have this industry that's available to them, and baristas and barmen and stuff like that. And if it were just kept to Irish people, of course, the whole law of supply and demand with wages would mean they'd have to pay a little bit more. They'd actually have to pay a living wage. And speaking of a living wage implies that it can get you somewhere to live. So back to Orla Red. They live in cramped conditions to lower their overhead. This increases housing prices for Irish people and undermines the labour market. You'll never hear Richard Boyd Barrett mention this. And that is the fact of the matter here. I don't need to come up with cool ways of phrasing it here. Orla Red's done it. These Brazilians, all credit to them, no disrespect to them, but they are living, and everybody knows it. The government know this. When they make these allowances and all of this stuff, they know this. This is part of the plan, part of the system. You have Brazilians living. I'll prove this sometime for you once this lockdown thing is over and I'm free to move around. I will prove this for anyone. Everybody knows it, but I'll prove it in visually and on paper. They sleep in beds 10 to a room, bunk beds stacked up on top of each other, right? And that's their choice. Maybe it's what they're used to, maybe they're cool with it, whatever. But they do that, and think about it, 10 people paying €200 a week. Where am I at with it? No, €200 a month. Let's say they're paying €200 a month for their rent, but there's 10 of them. And I'm sure they pay more than that. But that amounts to, if there's 10 of them in this room, it's $2,000. Whereas, so what should have been a room for you at, I don't know, a reasonable price, and this isn't even reasonable, but €400 or €500, something like that, right? Is now the landlord can make $2,000 or whatever. My figures are a bit whatever, but that's the ratio you're talking there. And again, that's part of the system. That's part of the plan, because the government want that. It's economic activity, whatever. It's cheap labor for these companies, and it's kind of a service class, a slave class, a kind of a waiter class for the kind of bourgeois middle class and the upper class to just have handy that they can have. Because if you own a company and you have a big company or a big restaurant, or whatever it happens to be, right? You have 30 staff on the books. Everybody knows this. What is your biggest cost? Your biggest cost is labor. Your inputs, your overheads, your electricity, whatever, all these things fall under labor. Labor is your big cost, right? And it's also your difficulty in terms of HR, in terms of getting people in. It's a logistical difficulty as well, right? And for a worker to be happy, for the workers to be happy, they need to be in the driver's seat. And for the employer, let's say the capitalist, so to speak, or I will call them, to have to struggle to get labor, to have to, God, I'm going to have to share out some more of these profits. And I'm not against entrepreneurship or anything. I'm not talking about making it needlessly difficult for them. I'm just saying my heart lies with the workers and not the person who's the owner. And again, that might sound anti-entrepreneur, but you see my point of view. Even if it's someone like Tesco's, that makes it a bit easier, a less moral dilemma, is that it's clearly you're on the side of the workers. When I hear Tesco's have given them a 10% wage increase, I don't have to be some kind of raging communist to say, I'd like if that were 30, I'd like if that were more. I want the balance of power to be shifted as much as possible to the workers. And that's much more powerful than any minimum wage laws or little trinkets that you can give them, is to just give them power against their employers. That's what matters to me. And 10 Brazilians in a bunk bed and working, but also on the books supposedly learning English, is not in the interest of the worker. And I thought Richard Boyd Barrett was all about the worker. He clearly isn't. He clearly is a globalist scumbag, like the rest of them. And that's why we need to talk about it. So that's my, I think that's my piece for the night, really. I made my Italy argument. I went through some random news, and we kind of looked at Orla Red's post about the visa racket, the English school racket. So yeah, that is about basically it. I told you I was going to recommend a piece of music. I'm going to put it in. Forgotten it altogether now. Name, Spanish guitarist. I'm looking at the viewers now. You're all going to go because I'm going to be like looking at my. Oh, what is his name? Damn, it's gone from me. I could put it in. I'm going to put it in the chat once I finish up. Any more rambles for you? So, oh, actually, I'll have a look at the chat. And if anyone can remind me what that guy's name is. I'm speaking to someone in specific who will know what I'm talking about. I'm just checking. Critique says I'm anti-Gambin. I'm being anti-Gambin. If not, if he might be talking to somebody else. Irish Patriot says hit the like button. I appreciate that. I think I can hit the like button. Yeah, cool. Yeah, I'll put it on my Twitter afterwards. That piece of music. It's really gonna bother me. Oh. There we go. It's called, I'm going to put it in the chat. It's just a really relaxing, lovely piece of music. I'm fond of it. And so, I don't know, maybe you're hanging off the side of your bed, or you're falling asleep on the couch, or you're just chilling out. It's a late stream, I know. This is a nice kind of, it's not political. There we go. It's Francisco Tarrega, or something like that, and the song is called Capriccio Arabe. I'm pronouncing all that wrong, but it's a lovely tune, and I'm going to leave it at that, and I will talk to you tomorrow night. Thanks for watching, lads. See you.